There is a ghost that haunts the hallways of the US Treasury, the European Central Bank, and every modern parliament in the Western world. It is not the ghost of communism, nor is it the ghost of fascism. It is the ghost of a country that once had it all and threw it all away. If you traveled back in time to the year 1913 and you stood in the center of Buenos Aires, you would not believe your eyes. You would see a city that rivaled Paris in beauty and London in wealth. You would see wide European boulevards lined with Beaux-Arts palaces. You would see the Harrods department store, the first and only branch ever opened outside of London. You would see a subway system, the Subte, that was opened before most cities in Europe even had buses. In 1913, Argentina was not a developing nation. It was one of the 10 richest countries on the face of the earth. Its GDP per capita was higher than that of France, higher than Germany, higher than Italy, and yes, even higher than Japan. It was neck and neck with the United States. It was the land of the future. Immigrants from Italy and Spain flooded into the port of La Boca, not because they were fleeing to a third world country, but because they were fleeing from a poor Europe to a rich Argentina. The phrase "il riche comme un Argentin," rich as an Argentine, was a common expression in French high society. It meant someone who had so much money they didn't know how to spend it. Fast forward 100 years. Today, Argentina is a cautionary tale. It is an economic basket case. It has defaulted on its sovereign debt 9 times. It has lopped 13 zeros off its currency. It has an inflation rate that recently surpassed 200%. It has a poverty rate that hovers around 40-50%. It is a country where saving money in the national currency is considered an act of insanity. How did this happen? How does a country start at the finish line and run backwards? The mainstream media will tell you it was bad luck. They will blame the price of commodities or the weather or foreign banks. But the truth is much darker. Argentina didn't fall because of bad luck. Argentina fell because of bad ideas. It was a slow-motion suicide, driven by a toxic cocktail of populism, corruption, and a refusal to accept the laws of mathematics. And the most terrifying part of this story isn't about Argentina at all. It's about us. When you look at the trajectory of the United States today, into the soaring debt, the political polarization, the rise of populism, the addiction to money printing, you're not looking at something new. You're watching a rerun. We are walking down the exact same path that Argentina walked a century ago. And if we don't turn around, the destination is the same. This is the story of the Argentine paradox, and it is the ultimate warning for the American empire. Part 1, the Golden Age and the Poison Pill. To understand the fall, you must understand the height. From 1880 to 1914, Argentina was run by a generation known as the Generation of 80. These were classical liberals. They believed in open markets, free trade, sound money, and foreign investment. They looked at the vast, fertile plains of the Pampas, arguably the best farmland in the world, and they turned it into a global food factory. Argentina became the butcher shop and the bakery of the world. They exported beef and wheat to a hungry Europe, and in return, British gold flowed into Buenos Aires. The British built the railways. The French built the architecture. The Italians brought the labor. It was a perfect symbiotic machine of capitalism. The Argentine Constitution was explicitly modeled after the U.S. Constitution. It protected property rights. It welcomed foreigners. It limited the power of the state. But beneath the gold leaf and the marble facades, there was a fatal flaw. The wealth was concentrated. The land was owned by a small oligarchy of families. While the immigrants could find work and eat well, far better than they ate in Naples or Madrid, they found it difficult to become owners. This created a simmering resentment, a class divide. And where there is resentment, there's an opening for a political predator. The first crack in the foundation came with the Great Depression of 1929. The global demand for beef and wheat collapsed. The flow of British capital stopped. The liberal economic model took a hit. In a panic, the Argentine military staged a coup in 1930. This ended decades of constitutional stability. It began an era of instability that would rot the country's institutions. But the real death blow didn't come from a general in a uniform. It came from a charismatic colonel with a smile that could melt a glacier. Partner Scouten. The Perón Infection. Juan Domingo. Perón is perhaps the most consequential figure in the economic destruction of a modern nation. He didn't just change the laws, he changed the soul of the country. Perón rose to power in the mid-1940s. He looked at the working class, the descamisados, or shirtless ones, and he offered them a deal. He would give them everything they wanted: higher wages, paid vacations, guaranteed jobs, unions with massive political power, and in exchange, he just wanted total control. Perón and his famous wife Evita invented the modern playbook of populism. They didn't care about productivity. They didn't care about where the money came from. They only cared about redistribution. Perón famously said, "For a Peronist, there is nothing better than another Peronist." He divided the country into the people versus the oligarchy. If you were against Perón, you were against the people. You were a traitor. So how did he pay for all the free stuff? At the end of World War II, Argentina was swimming in cash. They had sold food to war-torn Europe and had massive reserves of gold and foreign currency. Perón looked at those reserves and treated them like a personal checking account. He nationalized the railways, paying way too much for them. He nationalized the telephone companies. He nationalized the utilities. He created a massive state bureaucracy. He practically made it illegal to fire a worker. He imposed price controls on food to keep the urban voters happy, which bankrupted the farmers who produced the food. This is the classic populist trap: consumption over investment. Perón took the capital that should have been invested in factories, tractors, and technology, and he spent it on immediate consumption to buy votes. For a few years, it felt like a party. Wages went up. The working class adored him. Evita was a saint, handing out cash and sewing machines to the poor. But by 1949, the money ran out. When a normal government runs out of money, it cuts spending or raises taxes. When a Peronist government runs out of money, it seizes the central bank. Perón politicized the Central Bank of Argentina. He ordered them to print money to cover the deficit. And thus, the inflation beast was born. By the time Perón was ousted in a coup in 1955, the damage was done. The gold reserves were gone. The infrastructure was crumbling because nobody had invested in maintenance. And worst of all, the Argentine people had been taught a dangerous lesson: that the government owes you a living, that prosperity comes from a decree, not from work, that economics is a matter of will, not math. This mindset, Peronism, survived Perón. It became a religion. Even the parties that opposed him ended up acting like him because the voters demanded it. You couldn't win an election in Argentina by promising hard work and sound money. You could only win by promising more free stuff than the other guy. Part 3. The addiction to zeros. From the 1960s to the 1980s, Argentina entered a death spiral of volatility. Military dictatorships alternated with weak civilian governments, but the economic policy remained the same: spend more than you earn, print the difference, blame foreign powers when it collapses. The country became a laboratory for bad economic ideas. They tried import substitution industrialization, ISI. The idea was, why should we buy cars from America? We should make our own cars. So they put up massive tariffs, taxes, on foreign goods. They banned imports. They subsidized local factories. The result? Argentines were forced to buy expensive, low-quality domestic goods. A television in Buenos Aires cost 3 times what it cost in New York and broke twice as fast. The local industries were protected from competition, so they never bothered to innovate. They became lazy monopolies, sucking wealth from the consumer. And the inflation? It became a way of life. In the 1970s and 80s, Argentina experienced episodes of hyperinflation that defy comprehension. We are talking about inflation rates of 3,000%, 5,000% a year. Imagine getting your paycheck in the morning and having to run, literally run, to the supermarket to buy food because by the afternoon, the prices would be 20% higher. Shopkeepers stopped putting price tags on items because they couldn't change them fast enough. They would just shout out the new prices every hour. The currency became a joke. The government kept introducing new currencies, crossing out zeros. The peso moneda nacional was replaced by the peso ley, chop off 2 zeros. The peso ley was replaced by the peso argentino, chop off 4 zeros. The peso argentino was replaced by the austral, chop off 3 zeros. The austral was replaced by the current peso, chop off 4 zeros. In total, 13 zeros were deleted. A pension that would have bought a house in 1970 wouldn't buy a piece of gum in 1990. The savings of the middle class were incinerated. This creates a psychological scar on a nation. When you cannot save, you cannot plan for the future. You live only for today. Society becomes short-termist. Investment dies because who would build a factory that takes 10 years to pay off when you don't know what the currency will be worth in 10 minutes? This chaos led to the 1990s and the great illusion of stability. Part 4. The pizza and champagne era and the 2001 crash. In the 1990s, President Carlos Menem tried a radical experiment. He wanted to kill inflation once and for all. He hired a Harvard-educated economist named Domingo Cavallo, and they came up with the convertibility plan. The law was simple. 1 peso equals 1 US dollar, forever. To prove it, the central bank was legally forbidden from printing pesos unless they had a dollar in the vault to back it up. It worked like magic. Inflation dropped from 3,000% to near zero overnight. For the first time in decades, Argentines could save. They could get mortgages. Foreign investment poured back in. It was known as the era of pizza and champagne, but there was a catch. While the monetary side was fixed, they couldn't print money, the fiscal side was still broken. The government kept spending too much. Menem privatized state companies, which was good for efficiency, but he used the money to maintain the corrupt patronage networks of the provinces. The government was still running a deficit. Since they couldn't print money to pay for the deficit anymore because of the one-to-one law, they had to borrow. They borrowed dollars, billions and billions of dollars from Wall Street and the IMF. The debt pile grew and grew. Meanwhile, the one-to-one peg made Argentina expensive. It became too expensive to export Argentine wheat or wine. Brazilian products were cheaper. The Argentine economy started to shrink. Unemployment rose. By 2001, the math broke. The markets realized Argentina couldn't pay back the dollars it had borrowed. Now the interest rates spiked. The IMF cut off the lifeline. Panicked Argentines ran to the banks to withdraw their dollars. They knew from history that the government would steal them. And they were right. On December 1st, 2001, the government announced the Corralito, the Little Corral. They froze all bank accounts. You could only withdraw a tiny amount of cash per week. The savings of the middle class were trapped. The country exploded. Middle-class housewives, students, and workers took to the streets, banging pots and pans. The famous cacerolazo. Riots broke out. Supermarkets were looted. Police fired on protesters. President de la Rua fled the Casa Rosada, the Pink House, in a helicopter as smoke rose from the city below. It was the largest sovereign default in history at the time. Over $100 billion in debt, unpaid. The government that followed did the unthinkable. They pacified the economy. If you had $100,000 saved in the bank, the government forcibly converted it into pesos at a fake exchange rate. Overnight, people lost 2/3 of their life savings. It was the greatest theft of private property in the 21st century, and it broke the social contract forever. Part 5, the Kirchner dynasty and the soy boom. You would think, after such a catastrophe, Argentina would learn. You would think they would say, okay, no more deficits, no more lies. But history has a sick sense of humor. In the 2000s, a new savior emerged, Nestor Kirchner, and later his wife, Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner. They were Peronists on steroids, but they got lucky, extremely lucky. China entered the global economy. China needed food. The price of soybeans, Argentina's green gold, skyrocketed. Money rained down on Argentina again, just like in the post-Diouf era. A wise country would have used that windfall to pay down debt and build a sovereign wealth fund, like Norway. The Kirchners used it to buy votes. They expanded the welfare state to grotesque proportions. They created millions of fake government jobs. They subsidized everything: electricity, gas, water, football matches on TV. Living in Buenos Aires in 2010 was surreal. You could leave your air conditioner on all day with the windows open because electricity was practically free. But the power grid was collapsing because the electric companies, forced to charge pennies, couldn't afford to fix the wires. Blackouts became common. When the soy money ran out, the inflation returned. And here's where the warning to America begins to get truly scary. When inflation hit 10%, 20%, 30%, the Kirchner government didn't try to fix it. They decided to lie about it. They fired the statisticians at the INDEC, the National Statistics Bureau. They installed political puppets who published fake numbers. The government would announce that inflation was 9%, while everyone knew it was 25%. They made it a crime for private economists to publish the real inflation numbers. They fined them. Then they imposed CIPOs, capital controls. It became illegal to buy dollars. If you wanted to protect your savings, you had to go to illegal hives, caves, hidden exchange houses, or buy dollars from guys on the street called arbolitos, little trees. A black market currency emerged, the blue dollar. There was one price for the dollar if you were a friend of the government, the official rate, and a real price for everyone else, the blue rate. This gap allowed corruption to flourish on an industrial scale. If you were a politician, you could buy dollars at the cheap official rate and sell them at the expensive blue rate, instantly doubling your money. The economy became a feudal wasteland. The private sector shrank. The only growth industry was the state. By 2023, things had reached a breaking point. Inflation was over 140% and climbing. The central bank had negative reserves. They were spending the deposits of the savers just to keep the lights on. The poverty rate hit 40%. In a country that produces enough food to feed 400 million people, children were going hungry. This paved the way for the madman, Javier Milei, a libertarian economist with a chainsaw screaming that he would burn the central bank to the ground. His victory wasn't a vote for ideology. It was a scream of desperation. It was a patient with gangrene agreeing to let a man with a chainsaw amputate the leg because the alternative was death. Whether Milei succeeds or fails is a topic for another video. The damage he has to undo is a century deep. But now we must turn the mirror around. We must look north. Part 6. The warning for America. Americans like to think they are immune to this. They think Argentina is a Latin American thing. They think we have the dollar, we have the Marines, we are special. This is the exact same arrogance the Argentines felt in 1913. We are European, we are rich, it can't happen here. But look at the data. It is screaming at you. 1. The addiction to debt. Argentina got into trouble because it spent more than it earned for decades. The United States has not run a budget surplus since 2001. The U.S. national debt is over $34 trillion. It is growing by $1 trillion every 100 days. The debt-to-GDP ratio is over 120%, higher than Argentina's was during many of its crises. Just like Perón, American politicians, both Democrats and Republicans, have realized that voters love spending and hate taxes. So they borrow. They borrow to fund wars. They borrow to fund welfare. They borrow to fund tax cuts. They are charging the national credit card with no plan to pay it back. 2. The central bank as an enabler. In Argentina, the central bank lost its independence and became a piggy bank for politicians. In the U.S., the Federal Reserve has increasingly been pressured to keep interest rates low to fund the government's deficit. During COVID, the Fed printed trillions of dollars, effectively monetizing the debt. This caused the inflation spike of 2021-2023. We are hearing the same excuses. Inflation is transitory. It's Putin's fault. It's corporate greed. No, it is the money supply. When the U.S. government runs a $2 trillion deficit during peacetime and full employment, well, that is Peronism. There's no other word for it. It is populism masked as economics. 3. The rise of polarization and populism. Argentina was destroyed by the grieta, the rift, the hatred between Peronists and anti-Peronists. It became impossible to compromise. Every election was an existential war. The judiciary was weaponized. Does that sound familiar? The United States is currently more divided than at any point since the Civil War. Politics has become tribal. If the other side wins, the country is over. This instability scares away long-term investment. It makes structural reform impossible. You cannot fix Social Security or Medicare if the other side will instantly attack you for killing grandma. So nobody fixes it. They just print more money. 4. The destruction of the middle class. In Argentina, the middle class was wiped out by inflation. They fell into poverty, while the ultra-rich, who held assets abroad, got richer, and the poor became dependent on government handouts. In America, we are seeing the hollowing out of the middle class. Asset prices, houses, stocks, are inflating away from wages. A young American today faces the same reality as a young Argentine. You cannot save your way to wealth. You have to speculate. You have to buy crypto or meme stocks or leverage yourself to the hilt in real estate. This is the financialization of the economy. It is a sign of a dying currency. 5. The "it can't happen here" fallacy. The scariest parallel is the complacency. Argentina had the gold standard. It had the British backing. It had the Constitution. It didn't matter. Institutions are fragile. They are just agreements between people. If the culture changes, if the culture accepts that stealing is okay if it is for the greater good, or that math is a tool of oppression, then the institutions will collapse. We see this in the U.S. with the normalization of deficits. We see it with the weaponization of the legal system. We see it with the erosion of property rights, eviction moratoriums, asset forfeiture. The Argentinization of the United States is not a future possibility. It is a current process. When you see the U.S. government changing the definition of a recession, that is INDEC. When you see the U.S. government talking about price gouging and threatening price controls, that is Perón. When you see the U.S. government proposing taxes on unrealized capital gains, that is the confiscatory mindset of the Kirchners. Conclusion: the tragedy of potential. The story of Argentina is not a funny story. It is a tragedy. It is the story of a country that was given every advantage by God. Fertile land, oil, gas, minerals, no enemies on its borders, an educated population, and managed to squander it all. It proves that resources don't make a country rich. Institutions make a country rich. Trust makes a country rich. Argentina destroyed trust. It destroyed the trust between the citizen and the state. It destroyed the trust between the saver and the bank. It destroyed the trust between the worker and the employer. Once that trust is gone, it takes generations to build it back. As we look at the United States today, we still see a superpower. We still see the world's reserve currency. We still see the strongest military. But remember the man standing in Buenos Aires in 1913. He saw the exact same things. He saw a country that could never fail, and he was wrong. Economic laws are like gravity. You can ignore them for a while. You can build a plane to fight them. You can use rockets to defy them, but you cannot turn them off. If you print money, you get inflation. If you destroy profit, you stop investment. If you attack capital, capital leaves. Argentina tried to fight gravity for 100 years. The result is a wreckage of poverty and lost dreams. The United States is now standing on the edge of the same cliff, staring down into the abyss, holding a printing press in one hand and a stack of debt in the other. The ghost of Argentina is whispering in our ear. It is telling us exactly what happens next. The question is, are we arrogant enough to think we can defy gravity? Or are we humble enough to put down the printing press before we become the next century's cautionary tale? Because if you think it can't happen here, just ask an Argentine grandfather. He thought the same thing. And now he was waiting in line to buy half a carton of milk with a wheelbarrow full of worthless paper. The clock is ticking, the debt is compounding, and the ghost is getting closer.